Hey, hey, hey. What's going on, fam? It's Tuesdays with Tawana. Hey, so glad to be back. So glad to be here on this Tuesday. Holla at your girl as we create community, one Facebook Live, one podcast at a time. Hey, Cordio in the building. Yeah, so grateful for you. Grateful for those who will be listening on the Tuesdays with Tawana podcast. What's up, my beautiful niece? Yeah, what's going on with y'all? My question is opening up. The question to open up with today is what's going on in your world? Good morning, Mother Carolyn. In the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of tropical storms here that are winding down on the East Coast, yeah, in the midst of it all, in the midst of the challenges we are facing with young people going back to school, teachers going back to school or not, in person or virtual, are we able to see the beauty in the midst of it all? Are we able to see the clearing that just happened in the midst of the storm? Are we able to see the beams from the sun if you are in a sunny state, a sunshine state right now? Are you able to see the beams of heaven? One of my favorite songs, Beams of Heaven, as I go through this wilderness here below. Guide my feet in peaceful ways. Turn my midnight into day. Yes, this is how we're kicking off Tuesdays with Tawana today. What's going on in your world? How's your soul? How is your mind? How's your body? How are you doing on today? So, as usual, you shout me out in the comments. I'll shout you back. This is a dialogue. This is a community. This is a conversation. I can talk for 30 minutes because I'm a preacher. Or we can engage in some dialogue about some things that have been on my mind and on my heart. Hey, Tammy. Yeah, thank you for that. Meditating with the sun on my face this morning after a yoga session with my son. Great day to start the day. Absolutely. A great day, a great way to start the day. A good way to nurture your soul, your mind, and your body, and to be in communion with one another. With that, self care is so important these days. And keep hollering at me if you can. What's going on in your world? How's your soul? How are you doing on this day? This day full of grace and mercy. This day full of new opportunities to get it right. This day, Jonathan, love you. He says blessings and love. So good to see you while listening, while walking under nature. Yes, the beloved trees. I was just watching the trees, Jonathan, because I face um, not really um, like a forest, but it is a lot of trees in my view. And when the storm was happening, the winds were causing the leaves to just sway and blow, and I just sat there and watched for a moment because it was so beautiful. Even though the storm may have knocked out some power lines, I hope everyone is safe, caused some flooding on the roads, and yet I was still able to just receive the calming, the clearing, the cleansing that was happening. Hey, Kim Reese. Yeah, yeah. Hey, hey, sweet Harlem girl, brown Harlem girl. That be me. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, thank you so much. I absolutely love the song Brown Skin Girl by Beyonce. We're going to save this for another moment together when we talk about Black is King. Watched it from different lenses and different thoughts. And so, yeah, I look forward to having a dialogue and a conversation about that. So, as we were talking about self care, I was reflecting this week and someone posted, "Hey, brother, what's up, Donald? I hope all is well with you." I was thinking about self care, and someone posted, and I wish I remembered who it was. I tried to search for it today, but stating that self care is a privilege. self-care is a privilege. So I just want to expound on that. And from my language, for me, I would say self-care may be a privilege because it's not blanketed across those who practice self-care as a privilege. Some, it is an opportunity for some. It is a privilege for others where you have that flexible schedule that other people may not have, even to sit quietly and take a bath or light a candle or spend 5 minutes in prayer because they have young people in the house and they're working from home and they're trying to educate their children and a spouse or a partner or whatever it may be. That self-care may not come so easily, if you will, or naturally, where you can even pencil it in to your schedule. Yeah, Kim, riding out the storm. That's what we're doing. And that'll preach right there, riding out the storm, riding out this pandemic and taking care of ourselves and not missing the blessing and the beauty in the midst of the storm, in the midst of this pandemic. What beautiful things are happening in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the pandemic? What blessings are happening? What miracles are happening? What is happening as you are watching and witnessing and experiencing the storm and the pandemic that you can point out that is a blessing that may not have happened if it were not for a time to sit still, a time to reflect, a time to be forced to take care of self and to take care and to be with and to be in community with family and friends in a different way and to be co-creators in this thing and what good can come out of this pandemic. So when we talk about privilege, I just want to expound on using the word privilege usually kind of gives me, hey, Amanda, how are you? How are you? How are you? Um, Using the word privilege kind of gives me a little, uh, because it's attributed to racism, right? With white privilege, oftentimes. Um, some used to say, like, if we're standing and giving a presentation or speaking in front of an audience, it's a privilege to stand here. It's an opportunity to stand here. It's a gift to stand here and present or to preach or to teach. And so when I think about privilege now in these days, in these trying times where racism has always existed in this country, and now it's a different level or a different awareness for some. That word privilege, just I try not to use it too often. But when this person posted and said that self-care is a privilege, and in my language, self-care may be a privilege for some, um, it helped me to broaden my language and my understanding of privilege and not just to put it in this box. I read in one of the Medium articles that I get online that we need to stop using the word white privilege and use the word racism, call it out and call it what it is. Pretty truthful. And right now, there's a language that is understood, right? There's a language there that we all understand, and we'll get there. We'll get to the white privilege piece, but right now, I want to talk about privilege in general. Hey, Deirdre. Just thinking about the reports coming out that domestic abuse is on the rise during COVID, that some women are not safe in their home. How does one practice self-care when they're home, when in their home they are in danger? Um, this makes me nod that self-care is not something that everyone can practice. What makes me feel inspired is actually to practice self-care because I can. Wow. So what's my excuse? Beloved Deirdre, you are so right. And this is exactly what we're talking about, how privilege happens for some and not for everybody. And it's a privilege, or self-care is a privilege for some, and it is a privilege. It is an opportunity for people to practice that, and some people just cannot. Um, which then kind of runs parallel with this whole adage of homeschooling versus schooling at home. There are intentional practices where people intentionally homeschool their children. They are a part of a system and a network that is designed to educate their children at home. What we are going through right now in the midst of this pandemic is not necessarily homeschooling, but being schooled at home. There's a difference. There is a big difference because the homeschooling with the intention to homeschool your children is set up with a network. It's set up by design. It's set up by the parent or the guardian that says, I can homeschool my child. I can X out X amount of time a day, and we join this network to go play. And of course, we're in the midst of a pandemic, so that's going to look different. But there is a level of intentionality when you are homeschooling your child. Here, bringing schooling to home virtually is different. There is some, and I can't speak for everybody, but in my experience, the lack of support beyond computers, beyond the internet. What about play? What about teaching folk that no, you don't sit in front of a computer 6, 7, 8 hours a day? Homeschooling is about doing some educational work on the computer, online, virtually, and incorporating some work and some play and some rest and some breaks. But how do you do that? How do you create the space to do that when some of us don't even have the privilege to exhibit or practice self-care? Hey sissy, what's going on, Joss? Had to drop by real quick and show some love. Oh, keep being the dope brown skin girl that you are. Thank you, sister, and thank you for being on the front lines from day one and being one of those essential workers out there, putting yourselves at risk and having to go home to a family. Thank you for all that you do. Shout out to all the heroes, including the teachers that are going back into the classroom in about a month in some form or fashion, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's limited students, whether it's limited hours. Shout out to you because you're still putting yourself at risk. So when we talk about the opportunity to practice self-care, what does that look like even in a school setting where whether you have one child or four children in different age groups, if you have toddlers, how do you make that happen and steal away where you can't even go to the bathroom without one of your little beloveds knocking on the door saying mommy or grandma, auntie or titi or whoever is caring for the child, I need you or I need this. How do you create that space when you're not in a big home with extra bedrooms or a space where you can call an office? Your office has now become your bedroom or a place in the living room, but you're sharing that space. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, and I just want us to think about that and not assume that everyone has an opportunity to exhibit and practice self-care. Not everybody has an opportunity to homeschool their children. They are trying to create and replicate this opportunity to experience some semblance of education at home, but we are not thinking about the other layers that come along with that. Hey, Auntie, I'm glad you're on. Glad you made it today. My beautiful aunt, my beautiful aunt. Give honor and praise to our elders, those who have paved the way for us to do stuff like this, to the freedom for a Black woman to speak and for people to listen. Because there was a time, right, when we couldn't even vote. We couldn't even hold leadership positions in the church and in corporations and in nonprofits. And so shout out to those who have paved the way and who have showed us the courage and the fortitude and the resilience that we need to push forward and to insert our voices into a narrative that often omit us, including what's happening with our education system right now. I posted a quote by Nikki Giovanni in her book, A Good Cry, and she names the difference between school and education. So what are we doing with our black and brown children? Are we just offering, thinking we're offering, and I say we very loosely, because we're community, but are we just offering a space for children to experience school, or are they being educated? Is there an opportunity for dialogue? Are we inserting cultural narratives? Are we meeting them, the children, where they are? Are we meeting the teachers where they are? Because there are teachers who are risking their lives going back into the classroom, whether they're immune compromised, whether they their partner or whoever is living in the home with them too is an essential worker. So now you have all these folk exposing themselves to the elements as the numbers are rising in this pandemic, and you are asking teachers to go back into the classroom. I understand that we need childcare. Let's just call it what it is. I understand that there is a need for children to go to a different space and a different environment, but you have them going into this different space to sit in front of a computer while teachers are being called to provide childcare. Are we really truly offering curriculum that is educational? Are we really truly offering curriculum that is deeply rooted in a cultural premise, that is deeply rooted in expanding the mind and offering opportunities to learn and to expand awareness? Are we truly offering that? Are we offering visuals? Are we offering them an opportunity to move their bodies and to stretch their minds? Or are we placing a curriculum in front of them and saying, learn? This is not what teachers are called to do. They're called to be the co-creators that they are ordained and designed to be. And we're stifling their opportunity to educate our children because of profits over people. How are we can we do something different to create spaces where children and students and teachers alike can learn and share and exchange and grow and build an educational environment versus a static school environment? And we're assuming that parents, caregivers, whomever is equipped, they're equipped to take care of, to educate our children. There's a lot of assumptions going on. Yes, surveys were sent out. Yes, people checked. I don't have a laptop. I don't have internet. I need some help. But what happens when that help, the needed help, goes beyond the computer and beyond the internet? So we just must be mindful and name it that there is a difference between homeschooling your children and bringing school into the home, which goes back to privilege. Because do children have a quiet space to learn? Do they have an opportunity to have someone truly engage with them in one-on-one dialogue or some sort of interaction? Hey, Christina, good to see you, beloved. Christina says the history of compulsory schooling is being revealed big time right now. They're only even in school because we decided we couldn't force children to work and needed somewhere to stick them. So back to that whole needing to deal with the historical structure of the system, absolutely, because we know that the system wasn't built or designed for us to begin with. And now it's just further perpetuating itself in that same manner where it wasn't designed for us. It wasn't designed for the economically challenged. It wasn't designed for those who don't have this literal space in order to breathe, in order to take care of self in the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of more than 3 or 4 or 5 people living in a home. Hey, brother. Good to see you, Larry. So just we can probably do a whole podcast, Facebook Live on this alone, this topic alone, because we got it twisted. First, the mayor of DC said, oh, nope, we're not opening brick and mortar. And then there was a shift because somebody must have pulled her coattails and was like, no, we need to do this. We need to open up some of these schools, and the privilege of going to a private school that already had small classes, that already had the access to internet and gave their students iPods and laptops on a regular. So this shift is not as dramatic or extreme as the shift when you have 30 something kids in a class with old textbooks or photocopied textbooks and no computers and no iPads and no internet at home. Their computer is their phone. The list goes on and on and on. How do we stop the systemic ills that continue to impact Black and brown bodies? So tell them why you mad. Yeah. Tell them why you mad, son, as they would say in Harlem. Tell them why you mad. Hey, Miss Odessa, good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, Tammy, it's truth. This is about truth telling, right? This is my truth based on my experience, and I always welcome someone to enlighten me, to help me to expand my knowledge, to help me meet our beloveds where they are and bring them through these trying times, which is very challenging and difficult when we have a system that is mad at itself. Hear me for a minute. White people, the white collective, white supremacy, white privilege, white dominant thought, they are mad and angry, and they are taking it out on us because they mad because they have to live with the blood on their hands that their ancestors caused and posed and instituted, right? And so they don't know how to deal with their own stuff and reconcile with their own stuff. So guess what? When they're yelling at us in a store or following us because we're walking down the street, listen, reconcile your own anger with yourself. Don't take that shit out on me. Don't come at me with that. You deal with the blood that's on your hands. And how do you deal with the blood that's on your hands? You deal with it by naming the mishaps, by naming the injustice, by naming the cruelty, by naming the inhumane actions of your foreparents and to today. And people even today, people that you sit at the dinner table with, people that you sit celebrating a Thanksgiving that is rooted in a near genocide of our indigenous beloveds. You handle that without taking that out on me and putting your knee in my neck, without bursting into my home in the middle of the night, talking with a no-walk warrant and killing Breonna Taylor. Let's talk about the anger that you're dealing with, that you are taking out on me. You reconcile with that and make peace with your maker without having to degrade me or dehumanize me or demean me. So when we talk about privilege, there's nothing wrong with privilege in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing with what I'm saying right now. There is nothing wrong with having your own opinion. The problem comes if what I'm saying or what you're saying to disagree or privilege, when it degrades and demeans and dehumanizes somebody else. There's nothing wrong with having the privilege to go to college. Not everybody can go to college. Count your blessings. And make sure you lift someone else up as you climb, but don't demean someone else because they don't have a college education that you have. That's white privilege. That's white thought. That's individualism. That's meritocracy. That's respectability politics. But when I have the privilege to come before you and to share with you and build community, there's nothing wrong with that because we're sharing in this privilege. Privilege is shared. When it becomes individual, when it becomes demeaning and dehumanizing, that's where we go wrong. Christina said, I saw a news video going to see if I can find it from DC where someone said they were going to send the non-white children back first. I haven't read it, but need to. Yes, and please send it to me, Christina. Please send it to me. I would love to know what's going on and what's being said. I do try to stay connected indoors. So I do try to tap into a lot of Black media markets, but I also will read the Baltimore Sun or to keep involved, to be kept up to date on what's going on and to keep my finger on the pulse of this racist nation. So there's nothing wrong with privilege. There's nothing wrong with self-care and finding and creative ways to institute and to practice self-care, and maybe to be a beacon of light to someone who doesn't know how to create that space, who doesn't have the means, if you will, to buy incense or bath salts or anything that'll help calm the environment, or to invoke communication and good communication and cleansing and healing. They may not have that. So how can we co-create some creative ways so that self-care is available to all? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. And there are families out there truly struggling and quite frankly, it's not even socioeconomic at times. It's families who look like us, right? That have their children at home that just don't have the wherewithal or the opportunity to sit and to go and meditate or to sit still for a moment, because they're always working, always grinding, always doing something, whether it's for work or parental work or partnership work or family work. It's always work. So self-care, I offer the opportunity for us not to loosely believe that everyone can practice self-care and self-care is in their world. Not everyone has the privilege, if you will, to institute or to incorporate self-care in their world. So we've talked about privilege, we've talked about self-care, we've talked about homeschooling versus bringing school to home. And in the midst of all of this, we cannot forget that Breonna Taylor's murderers still are walking the street while we are still being harassed by police, and other folk, white folk. I didn't. Talk about articles that I didn't read. I kind of glanced at it before I got on. Some white guy shot at police or something, and he's still alive. That would not happen if that person was black. Or using a Kaepernick jersey when police are in training and they're training police dogs, and there's a Kaepernick jersey as the criminal. When does that stop, right? So let's talk about BLM for a minute, Black Lives Matter, before we close. So I've been experiencing a lot of feedback about Black Lives Matter. So if I can just offer, I'm not a founder of a Black Lives Matter chapter. I'm not, one of the leaders, but I do have experience in the movement for Black lives. So we have the affirmation called Black Lives Matter, period, full stop. Black Lives Matter, period. That is an affirmation. That is a statement. That is a reminder, not only a reminder for white folk, but it's a reminder for us as well. As we have seen a lot of crime happening in our challenged communities, in our socioeconomically challenged communities, we've seen it happen. The frustration, lack of resources, the list goes on. We've seen it. Black Lives Matter as an affirmation, exclamation point, full stop. Then you have the movement for Black lives. So you have a lot of organizations that are solely focusing on centering Black lives for liberation, right? For healing, for access, for community building, for Black lives, period, full stop. They are, and I don't know, I may be naming some older groups. I hope that they're still up and running, like 1 Million Hoodies, or Young People for Black Lives, and the list goes on and on and on. So that's under an umbrella called the movement. So everybody is kind of a piece of a puzzle, and the puzzle comes together to then affirm that Black Lives Matter. Then you have the official Black Lives Matter movement that was founded by Patrisse Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi. Right? So that organization, when people start screaming, well, where's Black Lives Matter when there's black on black crime, which doesn't exist, it's a myth, it's another distraction. Understand, beloved, that every organization has a role to play. So instead of asking the world, because Nikki Giovanni said we're talking to the wrong audience, we're asking the right questions to the wrong audience. So if you want to know what the organization Black Lives Matter is doing, all you have to do is look them up. Make a phone call in your local chapter. Find out what they are doing, because first of all, just because you don't see it happening doesn't mean that it's not happening, right? Whatever it is. Secondly, a lot of the infighting is a distraction. So if you want to know what somebody is doing, if you want to know what Tawana is doing in the movement of Black Lives, you hit me up and ask. If you want to know what Black Lives Matter, the organization, is doing, go and find out. Don't throw this disrespectful, rhetorical questioning out into the world and then turn it to yourself. Well, what are you doing as a part of the movement for Black Lives? What are you doing in your community where gang violence and gun violence is increasing day by day as the pandemic goes day by day? What are you doing? And as we talked about last week, yes, there is a fear in this work, period, full stop. Activists get killed. Activists go missing. Activists get hung. Those who speak up put their lives at risk. So let us honor those people before we degrade and berate and demean them. And even if we don't agree, we can agree to disagree and go off and do the work necessary to the same goal to stop killing us, to save our Black lives, to save our Black beloveds, to be able to uplift and encourage our Black beloveds, to tell our Black beloveds that we love them, to show our Black beloveds that we love them, to be in these streets, to dismantle white supremacy and white supremacy and white dominant thought and racism in our communities that is killing us, because there's somebody behind the scenes feeding us guns. There's somebody behind the scenes feeding us cocaine. There's somebody behind the scenes taking away funding from our Black schools and our inner city schools. There's someone behind the scenes. So it's all a distraction. And then we talk about young Black people killing young Black people, and we're missing the mark. We're missing the mark of Black Lives Matter. So if we truly believe that Black Lives Matter, then how do we then go and build communities so that they understand that their Black life matters too? Because the world has told them otherwise. So before we question and BLM, any organization is not perfect. Let me speak for myself. Having an organization, an anti-Black, to eradicate anti-Black racism, a racial justice organization, we are not perfect, but we operate in the perfect love of our beloveds. We operate in being for community and being for the culture and loving beyond measure and leading this love-based revolution where I don't have to necessarily agree with you and I don't have to rock with you. But I'm not going to stand out here and badmouth you, because that's what white people want to see. They want to cause the infighting. And please note, as I close, we as a Black diaspora are not perfect. We had Black folk kidnapping folk and putting them in and allowing white folks to enslave us. We had Black folk rounding them up, right? So we have to deal with that, and we have to reconcile with that. We have to do our own internal work. Just like white people, just like white supremacists, just like the oppressor has to go and do their own internal work so that we can come forth and they can build, we can heal, and then we can all build together. Dismantle what's happening now so that we can build a just, egalitarian society that is available to all. Not just men, not just white people, not just white privilege and white supremacy, white dominant thought. And I use those terms because that's not always white people, right? Sometimes it's us that has that type of mentality of individualism and perfectionism and meritocracy and respectability politics, because that's very white. That thought is very white, and people that look like us are falling for it. We see it in this administration right now, right? So that's my time. Thank you for joining Tuesdays with Tawana. Thank you for your input and your comments. Feel free when you find articles or anything, videos, send them to me. Send them to me. I'm always reading, always in some sort of book, always researching. Officially, my research, my writing will start next week because I meet with my committee chair for my dissertation on this Thursday, and we'll write out a plan, and then we're going to get started. So this right here gives me life. It gives me information because the work that I'm doing is the importance of centering Black lives, particularly Black women, for the purposes of this study, centering Black women as we liberate the oppressed and the oppressor. So we liberate the oppressor from their racism, and we liberate the oppressed in through healing and reconciling what they have been through so that we can build society together. So I love y'all. I love you dearly. Thank you for rocking with me on Tuesdays. Thank you for not leaving me out here by myself. I love my village. I love my tribe. Black Lives Matter. Arrest the murderers of Breonna Taylor. Arrest the murderers of Elijah McClain. Period. I love y'all. I'm out. Later.